Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. The Honorable Ratner Umedwar Senator, Miss Samia Madwar, esteemed leaders, honored guests, dear friends, good evening and welcome. My name is Hamida Bhimani, and I'm pleased to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for this evening's fireside chat with the Honorable Ratner Umedwar, Senator, and Ms. Samia Madwar, Managing Editor of the Walrus magazine. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations. I'm delighted to welcome you all here to the Ismaili Center, Toronto. For those of you who are visiting the center for the first time, this center is one of the 6 Ismaili centers around the world. Each architecturally unique, the centers were designed to reflect a mood of humility, forward outlook, friendship, and dialogue. This remarkable building opened its doors 3 years ago, and together with the Aga Khan Park and the Aga Khan Museum next door, form a magnificent complex, the planning of which began 18 years ago. A central purpose of the Ismaili centers is to encourage mutual exchanges and understanding between diverse peoples, communities, and faith. The centers are therefore not only places for spiritual search, but also spaces for broadening intellectual horizons and fostering an appreciation of pluralism. Tonight's presentation is part of the Ismaili Center Canada 150 series, a collection of diverse events throughout the year to commemorate Canada's 150th year of Confederation and to anchor Canada's role in the world in the decades to come. And we are particularly excited to hear from Senator Umedwar and her reflections on Canada and its contributions to the global and national scene on multiculturalism and citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy tonight's program. I would now like to call upon Sherzad Hirji, President of the Ismaili Council for Ontario, to introduce Senator Umedwar and Samia Madwar. Please join me on the stage.
Thank you very much, Senator Ratner Umedwar, Samia. Friends, welcome to a beautiful evening at the Ismaili Center. We are so thrilled to have all of you here with us this evening. And this evening is really special for 3 reasons for me, and I'll outline all of those. First, as a member of the Canadian Ismaili Muslim community, in addition to celebrating Canada's sesquicentennial, I love that word, our community, whose presence in this great country has spanned some 50 years, is also celebrating the 60th anniversary or the Diamond Jubilee of His Highness the Aga Khan, becoming the hereditary Imam of our Shia Ismaili Muslim community. And to commemorate both Canada 150 and the Diamond Jubilee, our community has launched a national initiative called Ismaili Civic 150, a pledge of 1 million hours of voluntary service to improve the quality of life of all Canadians and contribute to Canada. That is our 150th gift to Canada. Volunteer service to others is regarded as an integral part of the daily life of the Ismaili tradition. And the Ismaili Civic 150 pledge is our way of putting our ethics and values into practice. And this center, which is powered by volunteers, is a wonderful place for us to share this tradition with all of you. Second, and on a very personal note, this evening we have the opportunity to welcome a dear friend, a dear colleague, and a mentor to many of us. Senator Umedwar's personal story and journey have shaped her experiences, and have given her the courage, the wisdom, and the credibility to be a leading voice on the topic of diversity and inclusiveness. I have had the pleasure of knowing Senator Umidvar over many years and admired her passion, her focus, and clarity of thinking on the issue of diversity and immigration. I admire many things about her. There's a long list of things I could go into, but the one that really stands out and I think speaks to the way she has been able to influence and shape national conversations is really her ability to connect the barriers that newcomers, immigrants, and refugees experience, and to connect those with the systemic levers in society, whether they're institutional, organizational, political barriers. And she has a way of sharply attacking exactly the barriers that will make that difference to improve the life of those who are newcomers to Canada. And it's an incredible skill, and she has honed that skill over her career. And what a wonderful coincidence that we get to hear her on a day like this, when she was just on Metro Morning early this morning with Matt Galloway, did a very early interview, a fantastic one. It's on their website if you haven't heard it, discussing the census report that came out yesterday, talking about the number of visible minorities who are now the majority. And Senator Umidvar had a wonderful statement about being able to kind of deconstruct even those concepts of majority and minority in the kind of country we live in. And so a fantastic day for us to have Ratner also reflect on the census study that came out yesterday. And third and finally, the discussion of topics such as citizenship, inclusiveness are themes which resonate with me personally because of the journey that I have had and my family have had, and I suspect with many of you as well in the audience, especially at a time when we live in uncertainty and chaos in the world, where we think we're living in or moving into times of fear and division, which is completely the contrary value that Canada stands for and that many of us stand for. And so as we reflect on Canada's 150th year of Confederation, we recognize, of course, that our history includes our own troublesome experiences, whether with the Indigenous peoples of this land, the Komagata Maru, the Chinese head tax, the Japanese internment. I applaud the work that Senator Umidvar has done in advancing the ideals of pluralism and diversity in this country to build an inclusive and welcoming country where everyone has the potential to be their best self and to be a proud contributor to Canada's fabric. Now, earlier this week, His Highness the Aga Khan received a Champion of Change Award from the United Nations at a global leadership dinner, and he said something which I think was very prescient to the conversation we're having today. He said, and I quote, about pluralism, I quote, "This is a frame of mind which regards diversity, multiplicity, and indeed difference itself, not as a burden, nor a threat, but as a gift of the divine, an opportunity to learn rather than a danger to be avoided," end of quote. And tonight we'll have the opportunity to learn how we can think about the issue of inclusiveness, pluralism in the Canada that we live in and in the Canada that we want to live in the future. Before I take my seat, I'm going to introduce you to our guest this evening, the Honorable Ratner Umidvar, and your moderator, Samia Madwar. Ratner is an internationally recognized voice on migration, diversity, and inclusion. In April 2016, she was appointed to the Senate of Canada as an independent senator representing Ontario. Ratner is the founding executive director and currently a distinguished visiting professor at the Global Diversity Exchange, GDX, Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University. She is the current co-chair of the Global Future Council on Migration, hosted by the World Economic Forum, and a counselor on the World Refugee Council. She was formerly the chair of Lifeline Syria, which has had a huge impact on the settlement of Syrians in Canada. Ratner was appointed to the Order of Ontario in 2005 and became a member of the Order of Canada in 2011, with both honors recognizing her advocacy work on behalf of immigrants and her devotion to reducing inequality in Canada. She also co-authored Flight and Freedom, Stories of Escape to Canada in 2015. And this is a very short version of her bio. I could spend the next 20 minutes, but I don't think we want to do it there. I think we'll learn more about Ratna's real story as she talks to us about her story on the stage. We're thrilled to have Samia Madwar be the moderator, the fireside chat with Senator Umidwar. Samia has previously worked at Up Here, a Yellowknife-based magazine focused on Canada's far north, and also with Canadian Geographic. Samia's roots are in Damascus, Syria, and she enjoys writing science and environment stories and is particularly interested in learning and sharing stories about Canada's far north. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us this evening. We think we're in for a delightful conversation. Please enjoy yourselves, and please join me in welcoming Senator Umidwar and Samia Madwar to the stage. Thank you.
Okay. So before we begin, I wanted to say congratulations. I believe you've just won a Lifetime Achievement Award. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's strange to win a Lifetime Achievement Award when you're starting off on a new life. It sort of feels odd. COSTI, which is, I understand, North America's largest immigrant service agency, which is located in Toronto. It's celebrating its 65th anniversary, a wonderful organization and a wonderful event. It was very fortunate I could just walk across.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
well, congratulations.
thank you.
I wanted to start this chat with just, could you tell us about your own personal experience of immigrating to Canada?
Oh dear, that's how many minutes do we have for this? Because everyone's story is unique and very special, and I'm talking to a room full of people who have their own stories to tell, and I think it is really, really important to tell these stories to ourselves and to our families and to our children and grandchildren so they can connect our life here today with a life somewhere else. But before I tell you my story, I do want to thank you for being here today, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I want to thank them for being so kind as to accept my request that I should be chatting with you instead of giving a speech. I give way too many speeches in the Senate, and at some point your own voice begins to grate on you. So I'm very, very grateful that we're able to do this informally in this place, which, you know, we were just talking in the other room. This has to be one of the most beautiful buildings in the GTA, and what a gift, what a wonderful gift to our city from your community and His Highness. So I feel incredibly privileged. I'm an accidental Canadian. I did not set out, as I think many of you too are accidental Canadians, but for a quirk of fate or a quirk of politics in most cases, we would all be, I think, where we were born. I can see Adina, who comes from Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure she wishes at times she was still in Afghanistan if Afghanistan was a safe, secure country. I was born in India, very ordinary middle-class family, but when I went to study in Europe, in Germany, I met my future partner, who was a foreign student like me. And, you know, when you're foreign students, what difference does it make which country you come from? He just happened to be from Iran. So after we finished our studies and got married, we hitchhiked. I still remember this. We were wild and young. We hitchhiked all the way over to Iran and set down roots there, where you know, there's a lot of misinformation and mythology about Iran. It is a wonderful country and a wonderful people. I come from a culture, and I think many of us come from cultures that are innately very hospitable, but none of us have seen the level of hospitality that Iranians extend to their guests. It was a huge learning education for me. In any case, we had pretty ordinary lives, and then the revolution happened. And revolutions, and you're from Syria, I think, so you understand that, you know, a human being thinks that I live an ordinary life. What is this noise around us going to do to me? It's going to do nothing to me. And the truth is, revolutions and civil unrest touches you at some point, and it did touch us. And we had to actually, it was very dangerous, and we had to pack our bags and leave overnight without telling anybody, and we had to flee. The airport was bombed. I'm telling you the story because I think you all relate to airports being bombed and train stations being blocked up, and you know, you pack your bags, you get into a bus, you trek somewhere else, and you get to the border is closed. Anyway, we got to the border with our infant daughter, who was 1 year old, and we're in a room exactly like this, and one side of the room is Turkey, and one side of the room is Iran, and everyone's lined up according to their countries, and we want to get there. And there's a picture of Ataturk on the other wall, and there's a picture of Khomeini on this wall. And I remember sort of praying to myself that we so desperately wanted to get to the other side. It still overcomes me when I remember that fear. And we were surrounded by young Islamic guards. They were maybe 16, 17-year-old. They had weapons, and they were frightened. And I think we all understand what a toxic combination fear and weapons can be. So, you know, it was like a tinderbox, and I remember saying, dear God, if you get me over to the other side, I will never ask you for anything again. And we did get over to the other side, and I've broken that promise many times. Sadly, I'm faithless. But that moment keeps me grounded. It keeps me humble. It reminds me of the stories of other people and what they're going through. I'm not Syrian, I'm not Rohingya, but when I read those stories, there's something in me that responds, partly because I've experienced that. So we didn't have a country to come to. I mean, who the heck in those days wanted to have Iranians? We were the least popular people in the world because the American embassy had just been taken over by the Islamic fundamentalists. This was 1981. Nobody wanted to have us. And so we said, will Canada have us? And we applied for immigration. We went back to Germany to apply for immigration, and Canada said no, they would not have us. They would not have. I like to tell this story, especially to the Minister of Immigration. And I've told it to many successive ministers. And then so what did we do? We had no other country to go to, and we just said to ourselves, it has to be Canada. So we did what I now tell everyone else to do. Look around you, see who you know, find out who knows who, draw a map, 6 degrees of separation and influence, and by virtue of that, who knows who knows who knows who, we got to Bob Kaplan, who was at that time the Attorney General under Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And it was through his urging that my file was opened again, and we were allowed to come to Canada. So I still remember June the 6th, 1982. That was a very special day in our lives. Yeah.
For all of us, I think.
Yeah.
And so that was the early 80s. How do you think the experience of immigrating to Canada has changed since then?
I think immigrating to Canada has become more difficult because we've got more rules, we've got more processes, we've got more systems, we've been infected by a certain kind of fear. So I think those who make it to Canada are whichever stream they're in, they should count themselves as being fortunate. And there are other things that have changed in Canada. When we came in 1981, 82, it was perfectly normal to say to someone, you may be very well qualified, but you don't have Canadian work experience. And so that statement doesn't quite get put that way to immigrants now. It just gets put another way. So the discourse has changed and shifted, but the barriers have grown, if I may say, even more opaque, because one of the things you discover about Canada and Canadians is we're very polite people. It's very hard to find out the truth or the reality. Like, what is it that you're exactly saying? It was hard for us to do that, and I come from a culture where we're very curious about people. So, I want to sit down with you, Salma, and say, where did you come from? And, where do you live? And where did you buy your car? And how much did you pay for it? And what do you do? And who's your boss? And who do you report to? And how much do you make? That's the way Indians connect to human beings. There's a natural, innate curiosity, and that is received with utter disbelief in this country. And there's a physical backing off. So you learn very quickly in the first 6 months, you talk about the weather. You talk about the weather. And this should be something we should tell all new immigrants. Talk about the weather, because it's safe. It's safe. In the meantime, when people ask me when I go home to India, so who do you report to? And when I say I report to the Prime Minister, really. And how much do you make? I just say not enough. Which is the truth. Which is the absolute truth.
Well, you were up quite early this morning talking
Yes.
about the census data that was released yesterday. So we learned that Canada now has the highest percentage of new immigrants in about 85 years. What do you think that means? What are the implications for Canada's future?
I think those numbers tell us a few things about our country. We actually absolutely have a global soul. We look outwards. We are open to globalization, cosmopolitanism. But this incredible diversity is limited to our big cities. There are huge parts of Canada where it is much more homogeneous than we can ever imagine in a place like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. And I think this creates some tension. Because when we talk about diversity and pluralism and multiculturalism, the rest of Canada, the other part of Canada, may not understand this so well. And the truth is, they actually really, really, really want immigrants. I work with a lot of senators who come from the East, New Brunswick, the Maritimes, and other places, who would, frankly, count themselves very, very fortunate if they were able to attract and retain immigrants. Because immigrants, they know, create jobs, have children, they send their children to school, they put down roots, they do all the things other people do, but if they put down roots, they will stay. And refugees are in fact the most loyal Canadians of all. But there is a reality about small-town Canada and rural Canada. The jobs are not there, so immigrants are going where the jobs are going. So that's one deconstruction of this. Are we really multicultural, or are we just a bunch of multicultural cities in the rest of Canada? So that's one question we have to ask ourselves. The next question we have to ask ourselves is how deep has this actually affected our psyche? And there the story is maybe a good news, bad news story. And the good news story is look at Parliament Hill. 47 of our MPs are visible minorities. That's the highest number ever. Look at our cabinet, the highest number of immigrants and visible minorities ever. We just chose a leader of the NDP. In other words, someone who could one day be the Prime Minister of Canada, who is visibly different, but in other ways is just as Canadian as anyone else. So that is, I think, the good news story. The bad news story is that senior leadership on boards, both of in the corporate sector and in the public sector, it lags behind our labor market share of the population significantly. So I just looked at the statistics yesterday, whereas women have made gains on corporate boards, and I will admit that it's not fast enough and not deep enough, but they still have made gains from about 14% to 23% over the last 5 years on big, in the big corporate sector. Visible minorities have registered an increase of from 3.3% to 3.8%. Indigenous peoples, I will tell you, have dropped their share. Their share on corporate boards was 1.6%, and they have dropped to under 1%. So I think the divisions in this country around power and privilege are closing when you look at Ottawa and you look at politics, but in other sectors they're not. And then there's there was the good, bad, and ugly, and the truly ugly is that we have expressions of prejudice, discrimination, racism, call it what you may, that have a real impact on people's lives. New research or newish research from the University of Toronto tells us that if your name is Samir, you are less likely, 40% less likely, I think, to get called in for an interview than if your name is Sam. Even if everything about your two profiles is exactly the same. So I think we have work to do to become the inclusive, pluralist society that we aspire to be. But here's the wonderful thing about Canada. We aspire to be that. Look at us in comparison to other parts of the world who are stepping back from those liberal social values of inclusion, multiculturalism, and openness. They are saying, America first, for instance. And this is not just the US, this is in significant parts of Europe. People are turning inwards. They are anti-globalization now. And I think we sort of stand apart. And it almost, we have to be really careful that we continue to succeed, because if we slip, I don't know if there's hope for the world.
It's an interesting point you raised. It's been, looking at just the US for a second, it's been an interesting year of discussions around immigration and refugee policy, starting with a proposed travel ban at the start of the year. We had, there's talk of a wall, border wall. There was the DACA program being rescinded a month ago. So when you look at what's happening in the US, what do you think, what kind of role can Canada play in that?
So I'll make 2 points. One point being that we should not be smug. We should be very careful because there's a certain kind of social license that seems to have been granted in the world to talk about people and things in a way that was unacceptable 2 years ago. But it is not unacceptable today. And I want to, we're not pure from xenophobia. We're not pure of racism. And in fact, I looked at some figures from the University of Toronto again. There, 33% of Canadians like immigration. They like inclusion. They like pluralism. They like multiculturalism. They want to do trade with all parts of the world, and they want to do all that. 33% of Canadians do not like it. They want less of it. They want to return to Canadian values. Then there is the 33% in the middle. Those are the ones we need to talk to. So I think on the first point, I would say our first reminder to ourselves is let's not be smug. Let's not buy into our own narrative that is out there. Now let's come to the narrative. We do have a brand. We do have a brand in the world, and that brand is admired, even if it is not understood. And people look up to Canada. I'll just give you a little anecdote. I was in Davos last year, and there is, Canada has a party every year. The ambassador throws the party, and everybody comes to it. It is the hottest ticket in town. People were begging me, "Senator, can you get me a seat?" I said, "Why are you interested? I mean, tell me why you want to come to the Canada party." I said, "Oh, we just think we can maybe take away a little bit of your gloss." And I think they were secretly hoping that the Prime Minister would still show up. So there is this brand, and when you have a reputation, I think it behoves you to be careful of it, and to nourish it and to nurture it, and to feed it in a way that people learn from you and look up to you, and the learning and looking up is happening. And I'll give you a very concrete example: the private sponsorship program, which, and I'm delighted to see a member of Team Everest here with me, Pankaj Mehra, who's here today. I founded Team Everest. It's just a bunch of my friends and people who couldn't say no. About 20 of us, we got together and we said, we're going to sponsor two families. And we did that very successfully. We raised a whole pile of money, and everybody is doing really well. I'm really, really delighted. We're lucky. Our success, Canada's success in the private sponsorship program, which is a very unique public-private partnership, is now being actively exported as a Canadian idea that works. I understand Chile is going to launch its first ever private sponsorship program, as is Argentina. Brazil is thinking about it. Mexico has it already. And in fact, below the headlines, guess who is also launching a private sponsorship program? The UK. Okay, so we have a brand. People look to us. There is a huge industry out there that if I was not a senator, I would probably be advised to make money off, but no longer, which is, how does multiculturalism work in Canada? Show us, tell us, teach us. That's a huge advantage that we have, and our reputation, so we need to nurture it carefully.
So you just mentioned your relatively new role. It was early 2016 that you became a senator. Someone earlier this evening said that you're now on the other side. So can you tell us what it's like on the other side? How has it been transitioning into your role as senator?
I should first say, I want to acknowledge the help I have received in the Senate from someone you know very well here, Senator Mobina Jaffer, who has been my sponsor and my soul sister. I call her my soul sister because she is such a huge and sincere and selfless support to me. It is like nothing that I imagined. It's really impossible to imagine what the job is until you have the job. And the job is really one of listening to Canadians and reflecting what their needs are in legislation. So we make law, and we're not elected. And I'm very, very mindful of the fact that we have all this power, we're not elected. The laws come from the House of Commons to us, and we debate them, we improve them, we accept them, we reject them, we amend them, we send them back, we accept changes. That is an incredible amount of influence. It is also incredibly frightening because you can make mistakes, you can misinterpret the will of the people, and I'm very anxious about the fact that I don't do that. And I learned through I was responsible, I offered to shepherd the new citizenship bill through the Senate. This was the citizenship bill that restored citizenship criteria of the past, making citizenship easier to get and harder to lose, as opposed to Prime Minister Harper's "let's make citizenship harder to get and easier to lose. So there was a reversal. This bill was in the Senate for 8 months. There were senators who opposed it vociferously. There hasn't been another bill that was debated and fought so hard against and so hard for. And I think I learned by doing. And I learned my job by being an apprentice, in a way. I understand that it is a huge responsibility, but I'm also just not satisfied with being the Senator for Immigrants and Refugees. That's always going to be a very big part of the work I do. I was very pleased that at our hollering and insistence, the government has appointed a special envoy to Myanmar. That is important work that we must, that's part of our brand. I mean, if Canada won't do something, who will? But I want to bring that lens of pluralism, diversity, inclusion to all the work at hand. So we're going to be dealing with the marijuana bill. And the marijuana bill has a sister bill. One, it will legalize marijuana, but two, it will strengthen impaired driving laws so that the influence of marijuana does not create more danger on our roads. And we haven't passed these laws, we're going to debate them. But already I'm looking at this increased responsibility and authority that provincial police will have to stop people who are driving. Guess who they will stop? Can we just take a guess at who they will stop? We all know. It will be young black men who will be stopped. So I'm bringing that Toronto urban multicultural lens to this work and challenging the legislation and hopefully improving it so that we can be safe, but we can also be fair.
How do you see your role in the Senate? You're there as an independent, and from what I understand, and I think I include myself in this, a lot of Canadians don't quite know much about, the role of senators. So could you tell us a little bit about, the Senate in general, but then your particular role that you see yourself play in it?
So senators are unelected. And when you look at what's happening in the United States, all of a sudden you think, we have a good model, because you balance the power of the populist elected House with the balance of an unelected House of sober second thought, which is what we always say. We are responsible for thinking about legislation away from the pressures of the electorate, because we do not get elected. So we can look at a bill and say, what is this really about? Is this pandering to something particular or not? So, but the more important, I think, is the more important role is the protection of the Charter and the rights of minorities. That's always cited. This is our job, because the rights of minorities can very easily be overlooked or be superseded by the will or the desire of the majority to do something. So we always look at things and say, is our minority rights protected? We're looking, just give you an example, at a bill that will enhance. I can't believe I speak like this now. I mean, there's a bill on pre-clearance, which is extending the pre-clearance arrangements we have with the United States so that Canadians can travel to the US and go through customs here as opposed to customs there. And I think we all agree it's better for us to go through customs here. We all agree it's better for us to go through customs here. But there's an extension of the agreement with the United States, which will see pre-clearance set up in Vancouver, on Quebec City, so that it is a much more articulated agreement. And I think that is going to be good for Canada. It's going to be good for trade. It's going to be good for Canadians who go to Florida, et cetera, et cetera. But there's this little worry at the back of my head that the bill is possibly giving a little too much authority to the US customs agents on Canadian soil, where our charter rights are still primary. So, you know, you look at that, and I have friends, and I'm married to a Muslim, I have friends who have Muslim names, who already get harassed when they go over the border, especially if you have in your passport born in Iran, born in Pakistan. Good luck. You're going to be pulled aside, more or less. And these people tell me that they are actually very frightened that this extension of the authority that preclearance will give US customs agents is something that they worry about. Now, I think we can fix it, but it's important for us to have these debates and not just, you know, say this is fine. So this is what senators do.
Can we talk about a slightly different bill?
Yes.
Bill 62. What kind of message do you think that bill sends to Canadians and to the world?
I think it speaks to what I said earlier. There is a one-third block, and in this particular part of Canada, I think there are other factors that play in. They're deep-rooted, the deep-rooted commitment to secularism is one of them. I believe that this bill will be challenged in the Supreme Court very shortly, and it will be overturned by the Supreme Court as an infringement of the rights of individuals based on a number of provisions in the Charter. I don't think it will last. Now, do I think our government should come out and say, our federal government should come out and say that we won't tolerate this? The truth is that we live in a federation, and we actually can't tell Quebec what to do. And I do believe it's best for a problem or a solution, depending on which lens you look at, which is made in Quebec should be resolved in Quebec.
And I should have provided context. Bill 62 is the bill that was passed last week, and it was
Yes.
banning face coverings from
Yes.
those who are receiving public service. So it's sparked some interesting debate. I wanted to look. This is something that's that I'm particularly interested in. How well do you think? So it's been an interesting year, Canada 150, looking at reconciliation issues. And it makes me think, especially in my surroundings, you know, what are ways that we can really bring new Canadians, to bring immigrants into that discussion of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples?
I'm so glad you have raised that point, because if there's one thing we don't do well, is we don't generate the connections between the only two segments of our population that are growing. And it is actually quite surprising, the distance, emotional, cultural, social, spatial, the distance between our two communities is huge. I don't know about people in this room, but I've lived in the GTA for all of, close to 40 years. I did not have a friend. Maybe I had one acquaintance. I did not have a friend who was Indigenous until I went to Ottawa. Now, I understand Ottawa is a different place. I have senators who are Indigenous, and they are teaching me a great deal about that reality. I think we must make structural changes to our integration programs to develop those linkages. And one of the first structural changes that is being made is the oath of citizenship, which we had here some time ago. We had a citizenship ceremony here, which was beautiful. That oath of citizenship is being changed to include a reference to Canada's Indigenous people. That's a first symbolic step. It was, by the way, recommendation 94 in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. It was the last recommendation of the report, and interestingly enough, that's almost the first one that's being completely delivered by the government. I think we must find other ways of bringing these two communities together. I believe there are huge misunderstandings and fears on both sides, and the only way to overcome these fears is, I'm a very practical person. I think we should get to know people. We should have dinner with them. We should go for a walk with them. So I will challenge everyone in this room. This is the decade of reconciliation. Think about it. There must be a way for you to, as an institution or as individuals, to reach out to people who are from the indigenous community and develop an understanding of what their lives have been. There is a senator her name is Lillian Dick. She has a very interesting life. She's Chinese indigenous. I think her mother was Chinese. So she lived in a family where the ramifications of the Chinese head tax were being felt, and the ramifications of all the exclusions that were imposed on Canada's Indigenous people. She is my touchstone. So I will go to her and ask her, tell me about this. How did it happen? And we may know intellectually about the fact that the children of Canada's Indigenous peoples were taken away from them. But when you hear it from someone who is impacted, who will tell you, my child was taken away, or my grandchild was taken away, it is unbelievable. No matter what kind of racism we experience, nobody took away our children. I want us to think about that. Their children were taken away. What does that do to your psyche?
Yeah. You mentioned at the very start a couple of pieces of advice that you give new Canadians. One is looking around you, or those who wish to immigrate to Canada. You know, look around you. That's 6 degrees of separation. You also mentioned that you should always stick to discussing the weather when you're talking to Canadians. What other advice do you give new Canadians or those who wish to immigrate to Canada today about integrating into Canadian society?
Well, I think we all learn from our mistakes. And I made a couple of mistakes, which can't be undone because life goes on. I think one of the mistakes I made is I never became a member of a political party, because many of us think politics is dirty. It's not. It's, in this country, it's what you can do to shape the country. And by the way, it will help you a great deal, because you will get to know people who work in local ridings or in policy associations or networks, and your networks, your social network, will expand, and you will know people that you never knew before. And this is the piece of advice I always tell new immigrants. Become a joiner. At the top of my list is join a political party. I don't care which one, but join a political party. But also join local organizations like your Business Improvement Association or your Boys and Girls Club or your soccer, blah, 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 whatever it is, because this is the way our society functions. We function really well when we are gathered together around common cause. And most of these common causes are organic, but then they become institutionalized. And you know, the work I've been able to do around Lifeline Syria or TRIAC or Diversity on Board or others is all because, you know, we've been able to generate the networks that are important when you're trying to do something. So I always say to new immigrants, you know, I understand you have to stay in your community because that's what makes you feel comfortable. But it's important to put yourself through some discomfort as well, through some newness. It's not going to kill you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful chat with you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you to Senator Omedvar for your insightful perspectives on Canada and your experience serving in the Senate. We applaud you and your incredible efforts in promoting multiculturalism and diversity. A very special thank you to Samia Madwar, Managing Editor of The Walrus, for your engaging questions and for serving as our moderator this evening. The Walrus magazine has been a wonderful sponsor, partner, and supporter of past Ismaili Center Toronto events. We look forward to many more collaborations with you. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our presentation this evening. Please join us in the atrium for some more conversation, networking, and light refreshments. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.